I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible.
Let us pray. Dear God, in the midst of turmoil and pandemic, you have reminded us that now more than ever, we must look to you for guidance. Lord, we need you. This country needs you. Our world needs you. Help us as council members and city officials to base our decisions and actions on your principles and on the best interest of all citizens. We ask you to embrace and protect our medical professionals, our first responders, and all those who are working diligently to bring vaccine and hope to our people. God, we ask your healing on our citizens who have lost loved ones, those who have sick loved ones, those who are suffering very difficult economic times. The psalmist said, weeping may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. We thank you, our God, and let morning come soon. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Do we have any public comments? Okay. I have a couple, just briefly. First of all, City Manager Listy and I got to go to Belton ISD last night to present that traffic safety check to them. And this is Public School Board Appreciation Month. And I just wanted to have a shout out to the school board members in Belton. As everyone knows, we are intertwined, and part of our success is their success, and part of their success is our success. And they've done a magnificent job this year during the pandemic. So I just want to thank all those folks, certainly David, your wife, and all of those folks, and Dr. Smith for the fine job that they've done this year. Run out of air with these things right away. Secondly, a brief shout out to the police department. As I think most of us know, our department is one of 170 of over 2,700 statewide that's been recognized for best practices. We appreciate our local police department and everything that they do. And Jacob and Cassidy, let's put the word out. They're looking for 2 more wonderful police officers to join the fantastic police staff. So I want to appreciate them and hope that you find the people you're looking for, Chief. All right, the third item is to recognize the Finance Department for receipt of the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for fiscal year 2019. Mr. Lister and Mr. Rogers.
Not a paper one anymore. It's pretty substantial. Wow. Well, Mayor and Council, I just want to take a moment to recognize the Finance Department, continuing the great tradition of years past. This is the 34th year for the recognition of the CAFR in our Finance Department, and certainly a great team, and Mike Rogers and Susan Alleman and the entire Finance Department staff. Just want to recognize Mike and congratulate him, thank him, and give the council a chance to shout out to him as well. So appreciate it, Mike, very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Good.
Let's go this way. Let's go this way.
Back of the
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike, appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Wheelbarrow. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And no pressure, Mike, 34 years. And I was looking back at the history, and that streak started right after I came on the city council the first time. So I'm sure there's some correlation there. I'm just not sure what it is.
Just one moment and thank Mike and Susan. I think I've probably sent them more emails and questions and had more interaction with them than anybody. And they've always been so responsive, provided me any detail that I needed, and answered any questions and sat with me in meetings to just review things and help me understand public finance a little better. And I sure appreciate their time, effort, and energy to help become a better councilman. Thank you both.
Here, here. Yeah, thank you for saying that, John. I think we all agree wholeheartedly with that assessment. Okay, items 4 through 7 on the consent agenda. I'll read them. Item 4, to consider the minutes of meetings for January 12th, 2021 workshop and January 12th, 2021 regular city council meeting. Item 5, to consider authorizing the purchase of computer equipment through the Texas Department of Information Resources contract to replace the City of Belton's virtual server environment at a cost of $80,256.55. Item 6, to consider a resolution declaring that the updated January 1, 2021 population of the City of Belton is 22,833. And item 7 is to consider a resolution authorizing the submittal of a grant application to the Victims of Crime Act, VOCA, for the continued funding of investigative assistant to assist in victims of crime. Does anyone have any desire to pull any of those items? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve items 4 through 7 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item passes unanimously. Item 8, planning and zoning, to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from single family 2 with the conservation revitalization overlay SF2 to single family 3 on approximately 368 acres located at 300 West Avenue H, located on West Avenue H, east of Jackson and west of Davis Street, described as the Robert Subdivision, Block 126, Lot 7. Ms. Moore, I think that's yours.
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, everyone. The property, subject property is located off of West Avenue H and actually has a couple of different frontage, South Davis and Jackson. This location is generally just west of I-35 and north of 14. Here's a zoomed in look at the property. As you can see, there's an existing structure on the property. The applicant is proposing to demolish that house. Here's a look at the surrounding zoning. This property and most of the other zonings around this area are all zone single family 2 with a CR overlay. The adjacent property just north of this property has a PD SF2 infill development zoning, and that was to allow for a reduced standard. The depth of the lot, I believe, did not meet the required 100 feet at that time. What the applicant is requesting is to subdivide this property and to construct 2 new residents that will front West Avenue H. The lots will meet the required standards for the single family 3 zoning district. It has approximately 7,920 square feet, and the width is 50 feet and the depth is 90. Here is a proposed look at what the applicant is proposing. 2 individual lots. The lots are 90 by 88. The proposed house is approximately 12,017 square feet. And here is a layout with the proposed house on it. Because there are so many different street frontage, the applicant is required to meet a 25-foot setback from Davis, Jackson, and also Avenue H. The applicant has provided that information meets that setback. The interior setback is 5 feet from the property line, and he's showing that setback as well. The rear setback is 20 feet from the property line, and he meets that as well. The future land use map shows this area as a mixed use suitable for regional shopping and different types of residential uses. The requested single family 3 is compatible with the existing residential use in this neighborhood and the residential zoning as well. Single family 3 appears to be a reasonable request at this location. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We received 1 letter of support from an adjacent property owner. And we also had a neighbor stop by the office last week to get some more information on the request. He was concerned about multifamily residential fourplexes being constructed on the property. He was okay with the 2 individual houses. The Planning and Zoning Commission met on January 19, and they voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this rezoning. Staff concurs with that recommendation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
I have one. If we could go back to that satellite view.
Sure. This one?
Yes. Well, there was one more, the next one, I think, that zoomed out a little bit.
That shows the zoning?
It was a satellite, but that's fine.
This one?
Yeah, that one. So it looks to me like, and I know you probably didn't measure all those lots, but looks like to the north and west, there's 4 houses kind of right there on that end of the block. And then it looks like just the north end of that block, there's 4 houses. And it looks like those lot sizes would be pretty similar to these two. Just looking at it overhead like this.
Correct. Most of the property owners in this area has already subdivided their property into 2 different lots. So it is very compatible with what's already existing there.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out. It looks very compatible.
Correct.
I sure appreciate the applicant adhering to the setbacks in this area. That makes a big difference to me. And one thing I have noticed and get a little concerned about is parking and parking requirements with infill. And it seems like we are not able to control that or oversee that very well once that zoning is changed. And so I'm just curious about the parking requirements for this zoning change.
What is required is they're supposed to have 2 parking spaces for a single family resident. And the house plans actually shows a garage, a 2-car garage. And they're also required to have spaces outside to accommodate for maneuvering in and out of the parking area. So they will have a driveway access off of West Avenue H to accommodate for that as well.
Any other questions?
No, infill is good. Infrastructure's already there, so we don't have to worry about all the other things. So that's good.
Drove by that property yesterday and it looks like an ideal use for that old home is going to be gone. 2 nice new homes. It'll improve the looks of the neighborhood. And as David said, infill is good. It fits the philosophy that we've been trying to establish of upgrading and filling in spots. It looks like a win-win for everybody. Any other questions, or do I hear a motion? Public hearing. Get ahead. Anyone wish to speak for or against this?
All right. So I guess if there are no comments, I'll make a motion that we adopt the zoning changes presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Measure passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9 is to consider the following actions related to the proposed River Farm Municipal Utility District located east of I-35 between Shanklin and Elmer King Roads. Mayor Pro Tem Kirkley is going to excuse himself at this time. East of Toll Bridge Road. There are 3 separate propositions here. Consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a development agreement with River Farm Limited. B, to consider a resolution authorizing the creation of River Farm Municipal Utility District. And C, consider a resolution consenting to annexation of the city tract into the River Farm Municipal Utility District upon the completion of obligations related to the construction of Toll Bridge Road. Mr. Listy.
Thank you, Mayor Carpenter and council members. We're here today to look at the 3 items associated with the creation of the municipal utility district for River Farm. If the council's ready tonight, all those items are ready for your favorable consideration. This is a significant request, one that we spent quite a bit of time on last time during a work session. I'm going to go through a series of slides. Some of them are similar or repeat of last time, but I think it's a significant enough proposal that just want to reiterate some of the items, the information that we talked about. There are certainly some revisions to the documents that we've received over the last couple of weeks, and we'll go through those as well. All right. Can you advance that for me, Chris? There we go. There we go. All right. So again, the location, I think we're all pretty familiar with this location now. on the east side of Toll Bridge Road between Shanklin and Elmer King. You can see the location there on the map. It's dark. Okay. All right. Okay. As was mentioned, we're here today to look at 3 different items for your consideration. After our work session last time, the input from the council at the previous meeting focused primarily on density of the project and development quality. We've talked a number of times about the number of units, the maximum 1775 on this 481 acres, just under 4 units per acre. The minimum lot size, 50 by 100, 5,000 square feet. What the council expressed last time was an interest in some additional variety and a commitment to some larger lots. And the applicant has responded with the proposals that you see there, stating a maximum of the development would be a maximum of 70% of the lots would be 50 foot. A maximum of 15% would be townhouse or patio home lots, with a minimum commitment of 10% to 60-foot lots or 6,000 square feet. So that was in response to what the council had mentioned last time. And again, as the mayor mentioned, 3 items on the agenda for your action tonight: authorizing the city manager to enter into the development agreement with River Farms, and then 2 resolutions: a resolution that would authorize the creation of the MUD, and then finally a resolution consenting to the annexation of the city tract, that's the portion down along the river, into the MUD upon completion of the Toll Bridge Road obligations. So last time we talked a bit about annexation and de-annexation. This is a similar slide to what we had last time. Again, the overall acreage, just under 500 acres, part inside and part outside the city limits. The proposal is again for an outside city MUD, which would result in the maximum reimbursement for infrastructure. The 304 northernmost acres to be developed first, currently in the ETJ and subject to a non-annexation development agreement, which expires later this year. The area along the river, the 177 acres to be developed later, and the obligation for Toll Bridge Road, when that is satisfied, the current city limit portion would be de-annexed. Another important consideration in this MUD is the commitment to a strategic partnership arrangement or agreement. And what that does is the applicant and then all the successive purchasers of homes in the area would waive their rights to oppose any future annexation of the property when the MUD bonds are paid off, if the city chooses to annex the property at that time. So again, this is a blow up of the property. The area in purple along the river is the 177 acres inside the city limits, and the brown area is the 304 acres outside the city limits. Some of the elements that are included in the MUD development agreement, again, an emphasis on the maximum number of dwelling units that will occur here. Something that's important, and we talked about a little bit last time, the applicant will still be subject to all the subdivision ordinance, subdivision plat review to occur by P&Z, City Council, and Bell County Commissioners Court, and compliance with city standards for streets and utilities. So that's the major review element, the review as development phases come forward. So you'll see that in multiple phases, as you have with Three Creeks in recent times. On streets and drainage, Bell County will be responsible for those following inspection by the city and acceptance by Bell County. On the water and sewer, of course, we will be responsible for those for maintenance following, again, construction, inspection, and acceptance of those. The term of the MUD is 30 years. And so I wanted to mention that. I don't know if that came up last time, but wanted to reiterate that back to y'all as well. Again, continuing some of the elements that are in the revisions that you have before you, there is one whereas recital that I wanted to call to your attention. It indicates that the owner will be seeking a MUD through either TCEQ or the Texas legislature. It's the number 4 whereas on page 2 of the development agreement. The owner cannot change the MUD terms approved by the council, but the schedule, as we understand it, is the issue that's kind of creating this dual approach, basically. The legislature, obviously, with their session ending likely in June, may be a quicker path to the actual establishment of the MUD than TCEQ, which would probably take till the end of the year. So our attorney representing us, Trey Larry, is available to answer any questions you might have about that issue, but that was a new component in this draft. Originally, it just said TCEQ, but the legislature component was added, and we've inquired about that and asked about that. But again, we're proceeding, and we're certainly here today to recommend approval of this item today, recognizing this dual path, but it won't change anything the council is considering, because whatever agreement you make with the landowner, those are commitments that would be reflected in any outcome, whether that is from the legislature or by just TCEQ. So if there's any questions on that, we can stop now, or I can continue, and then we can come back and answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Okay. The applicant has also added definitions to the MUD agreement. Those are valuable. There were a number of things that just lacked a little bit of clarity, and so we encouraged that, and they have agreed to that. Also, the general concept plan, you may remember that drawing that they had in the packet originally that showed layout of the development in a very conceptual way. That has been deleted, and we've had some discussion about that. We feel like the MUD implementation will rely on the exhibit that we spent a lot of time talking about last time. It used to be called G, now it's F, just because of some renumbering. We've worked with the applicant to title that exhibit Design Districts and Design Guidelines. It's the very last 3 pages in your packet if you want to look at that on that we provided to you this afternoon. Basically, if you think about it, the design districts relate to location, where the different housing types will be. The development, the design guidelines are how they're to be developed, with the masonry and the landscaping and the different standards. And so that's the how of development. So we believe they've responded and addressed those items in a very thorough way. And I think all the questions that we would have from a permitting standpoint have been answered satisfactorily. The development regulations have been revised. Of course, again, a reiteration of the maximum number of dwelling units. And the key elements that will guide our permit review and approval are the codes, basically. Subdivision ordinance, the design manual for construction of streets and infrastructure, code of ordinances, city building regulations, international building code, and so forth. Again, E here, the design districts and design guidelines are the things that address design, density, location, masonry, and those issues that the council had some concerns about last time. So again, we believe they've addressed all those issues satisfactorily. Again, annexation of the property may occur when 90% of the land is platted and the bonds have been reimbursed, or 30 years. And so again, that's something to think about. 30 years sounds like a long time. It's not that long. We've been in Three Creeks 11 years already. So it's really not all that long in the big picture of things, basically. So that's the kind of time frame we're looking at in terms of bringing this property into the city limits. On Toll Bridge Road, we recommended, and the applicant agreed to, a consideration at least of designing phase 1 and phase 2 of the road simultaneously. There was some question about timing of the city's acquisition of right-of-way for the balance of the road. And we thought that kind of raised the issue of us encouraging the design of both phases simultaneously, so we can identify the right-of-way needed that will be responsible for securing outside of the applicant's property. And they've agreed to that. There also was a true-up added at the request of one of the council members to ensure that the contribution to phase 2 is adequate if less lots are developed. And so that has been added, and we believe the language is good for that as well. We've also added the Bell County review of plats for streets and drainage. Again, that's important for their consideration they're going to be taking those areas over for maintenance and for the long term. And so they need to be involved in that. On that, that last exhibit that has to do with design standards, there's also a provision for variances. Of course, this property's outside the city limits, so there's no ZBA, zoning board of adjustment, or any mechanism to address variances. So there's a statement that indicates minor changes can be addressed by the city manager, landscaping, limited setback adjustments, where they get into some kind of issue. But major issues, density, lot types, construction materials, that would come back to the council for y'all's review. Okay. Again, the water and sewer reservation, this is again identical to the one last time. 33% of the capacity utilized by this development, and the significant contribution toward that, almost $2 million on the sewer side and $400,000 on the water side. So significant. And that will occur with building permit payments as each final lot is platted. Again, Toll Bridge Road, we've talked about this a bit. This is similar to last time. A developer will build Toll Bridge Road adjacent to their entire property with the first phase. We'll build phase 2 later, and there's some timing issues associated with that. And we look to try to get the design for that addressed up front. Applicant will dedicate half the right-of-way, and then we'll secure the other right-of-way. And then again, these exhibits are the same as we showed last time. The street section, the 3-lane section adjacent to their property, and then the 2-lane section north of here to Shanklin. And again, the timing of that is described in here, as well as the true-up that we mentioned before. The fiscal impact, again, similar to what you saw last time. The numbers have not changed. Again, the significance of the numbers is really the only reason why I put this up again, to indicate the contribution on the water and sewer, 2.3, Toll Bridge Road, as well as permit and inspection fees. The point here is that we will be made whole by the cost and the permit fees that we've talked about. And then the residents will pay the 125% rate for water and sewer services here as this development occurs. And then the city will not receive property taxes until it is annexed into the city limits. The permit fees, again, just to reiterate these again that we showed last time, we will work with the applicant to again recognize these, and they've seen these and accepted them as well. So here we are at the conclusion of my summary. Basically, as I mentioned, there are 3 actions for the council to consider tonight: authorizing us to enter into a development agreement. To do this, again, the MUD development agreement is the umbrella agreement. Items B and C are actually a part of the MUD agreement, but we are required to take action separately on those, approving a resolution authorizing the creation of the MUD, and then also a resolution consenting to the annexation of this property into the MUD itself once the obligations for Toll Bridge Road have been satisfied. So I will stop there and basically just indicate our position that we work very closely with the applicants, folks, their attorney, and all, to try to get this in form for the council to consider tonight. We believe the applicant has been responsive to the council's comments last time, and we believe the detail is sufficient for your consideration. The agreement and the associated resolutions are in substantially complete and satisfactory form for your consideration tonight if you're ready to act on it. And so our recommendation to you would be to approve all 3 items, subject to any final input from the city attorney and any concerns or comments the council might have at this particular point in time. And I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Listy. Questions from council members?
Sam, do we not need a true-up function on the utilities as well as the Toll Bridge Road contributions? Because if we have less lots, we're going to end up with with less dollars towards those utility payments. If we have bigger lots, we're not going to have 1775 total. But we've got a fixed rate right now per lot, which, and I guess the core value is the 5,000 square feet, 50 by 100. And our calculations are based on that. But if for example, we end up with significantly less number of lots because they're bigger, if we're still paying that same amount with no true-up function, then we're going to end up short of what we're agreeing to here on the utilities payment side for water and sewer. So in my mind, we've got to have a true-up function there, just as we did for the Toll Ridge Road contributions.
Sam, would you like for me to address that?
I don't think he can hear you.
Go ahead.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
I believe that concept is in the last sentence of section 6.1. I'm not sure exactly on the page numbers of the document you have before you, but it provides that if the owner has not paid the full share by the time of the last lot being platted, that the remaining portion would be paid and there would be a true up.
But not until the last section is platted. So if we deferred the platting of the last section for 29 years, we would not have the true up done until the 29th, 30th year.
That's correct, yes.
And that's for water and sewer
That's correct.
that we've already put in and they've dedicated
Well,
the water dollars up front.
It's 1775 lots, yes. But I think we all believe that the market is going to require some larger lots and therefore less lots overall. So I think we're going to end up with a significant bogey at the end that even with this stipulation is not paid until the very last section is platted. And I don't think that's acceptable.
What?
On the other hand, I don't know how to fix it because you don't know until you plat the last one exactly how many lots you've got.
So
Trey, what the council member is mentioning is not, we've tried to address it on the road. It may not be addressed on the utility side, the water and sewer, which are also based on number of lots. Is there a way that we might address that, or is? Well,
it's Sam, it's addressed the same way, that at the end, if there's on the road, if there's, and it works both ways, if there's too much paid or not enough paid. Mindy is on the phone representing the owner. Mindy, do you have a suggestion or want to say anything?
I do. I just want to state that that's the way that true ups always work, is that you have to see how many connections and lots there are before you can determine whether you've been over or underpaid. And that's not uncommon. And note, especially with the utilities, that we are paying for utilities based upon the capacity that we need. And so it's a maximum amount of 1,775 lots. And so in my mind, this is fair and equitable to both my client and the city.
You may not be able to see that Sam and John are conferring right now.
yeah,
Let's give them a minute.
so here's my 2 cents on the utility. And John just referred to it, is the water sewer are planned in that region to serve that region. So whether this is developed, this particular plat is developed, or other lots are platted, this is meant for all of them. So this is a regional investment, not a MUD specific investment. The road is more of a MUD specific investment. There's a need for that. It's not really going to serve the region. It's going to serve mainly that. And so I think with this, if they were to have the MUD or not have the MUD, we're going to have most of the utilities in there anyway. Now they're also going to take up 50%, potentially 50% of that, the sewer. I don't know what the number is. 33. Sorry. Yeah, it's 33. So anyway, so I don't have as much heartburn about it because they're going to contribute a significant amount. If it's 1772 or 1523, there's going to be a significant amount paid towards the utilities. And honestly, if they are larger lots, they're probably higher value, which means we'll probably get eventually more tax revenue per acre potentially, or per house. I mean, it all kind of, I think, evens out in the long run. So.
Well, won't they also be kind of paying as they go too? So they'll be reimbursing for the use as they use it. I mean, so we're talking about a true up for, the end, but we're going to get reimbursement all along the way.
We are.
The idea of what they're paying for water and sewer is based on 1,775 lot. That was what Angela for weeks worked on. If they build 1,775 units, this is what they ought to pay based on what the capacity they're using and everything that goes along with that. If they only build 1,500 lots, they're not using the same capacity. So they shouldn't have to pay the total amount.
And that capacity will be left for the city.
Right. But we'll get less money, but we'll have more capacity for someone down the road across the highway or wherever it might be. That's the theory behind, there's no perfect way to figure this, obviously. If you have one small house, it may use X. If you have one big house, it may use 2X. So there's no way to make this strictly black and white, but less units means less capacity on our system, so they should pay less. That's the theory behind it.
And the final plat will catch it up. The last final plat will catch up to whatever the maximum use of the line is, and they'll pay that share. So that's the way to catch it up, basically.
Okay.
Whatever
And
that
there's-
number
and
ends
there's
up being.
And there's a financial incentive. I mean, honestly, if you look at the amount of money they would be paying to the city versus the amount of money they would get by platting that last, there's a financial incentive to not. I mean, they want to sell the lots.
Right. Oh, I'm sure.
So,
Yeah. And I think it'll happen very quickly.
But they
relatively
will
speaking.
pay, to your point, they will pay for the 1,775. That's what the true up will be, even if they're only developed 15.
That's the point that Craig's making. They would not pay to that ultimate amount. If they only build 1,500 homes, the permit allocation for the water and sewer will be based on the actual
15.
number of platted lots. So
which, like John said, is based on,
Based
it's
on
a
usage.
utilization, X
Yeah.
number of dollars per unit. So that's how much they would be using.
It's an
So
Then
estimate.
Why
big
are
house
we
uses
talking
more,
about a
small house
true up? I
uses
thought
less,
the true
but-
up is what
Okay.
catches up at the very
true
end.
up is on the road. There's a road true up built in here because phase 2 is going to occur later. And so there's a true up there in case the density doesn't quite pan out as proposed.
So there'll never be a true up of any kind then on the water and sewer. They're going to pay for what they use.
What they use with
Not
the
the-
last
not
final
ever pay
plat.
the
They may
1775
not.
if they don't.
They
use
may
that.
not, correct.
Okay.
But they will pay for what they
The
use.
true up, if you would, is they're paying for what they use, whatever that is.
Okay. I'm good. Answer your question.
Yes, sir.
Other concerns?
No concerns, but I've just enjoyed being involved with this project and maybe a little more than others with Marion in some initial meetings and Zooms and conference calls, and felt like I've had a crash course or self-taught study in MUDs with in-city, out-of-city, legislative and TCQ and bonds and boards and everything else that went with that. And I always went back to kind of compare how this compares that the city council and city approved with Three Creeks. And are we doing better or worse? Are we giving up more? Or is this better for the taxpayer? And a couple of goals of mine were to spark development, ensure that the taxpayer is taken care of, and hopefully see some south side development. And with their commitment to Toll Bridge Road, which is 100% inside the city limits, and that's several $1 million, $5.5 million, something like that. Commitment to water and sewer and paying their fair share on capacity. But also having an end user at the end of the line when water and sewer goes in is also, I think, a big advantage for development south side. And so Three Creeks didn't put up $10.5 million or over $10 million, didn't commit to any outside road structure or improvement, and built a water line for their use. And so I think the negotiations have been stressful at times for the city and the developer. But boy, I really do feel like the taxpayer, number one, is not penalized, hurt now or in the long run. We do see a nice development on the south side, which we haven't seen. We've gotten that water and sewer line down, improved Toll Bridge Road, and just done so many things with this specific project. And one other thing that kind of entered my mind is I started thinking about our school system and the partnership that we have with our schools. And the last time Belton ISD built the elementary school was 7 years ago. Prior to that, it was 25 years that Belton ISD built a school in Belton city limits. And development helps our school district, it helps our community, and I just think development is critical to the continued growth of this city. And this is a very planned, thought out, amazing piece of property that this development's going on. And I really do think we have dotted every I and crossed every T for the taxpayer, but also for the developer to move forward with this project, knowing the costs they're going to incur. Toll Bridge Road is huge, and I don't know of any other developer that's done a whole road, not just the portion in front of theirs. And I think that will also spark development on the south side. There's opportunity there. We have development agreements for a little bit longer before that has to be tested. And I hope we can move forward with this. I do feel good about it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, and I want to just not echoing everything he said, because I do agree. I think another thing it does is it puts a flag, or it plants a pole, or it sets a precedent for that region for the quality of development. If we would have approved RV park, or I don't know, some repair shop along I-35 and stuff, it would have set a different tone. This sets a really good tone. It allows us as a city to make sure that we continue to have highest and best use in that area, which is a gateway. And I think that's one of the keys for us, is to have a really good gateway development, which I think this is. So I concur.
And back to John's point about that school, it was built 7 years ago, is already over capacity. And certainly we've historically seen what happens when you build an elementary school. Things just snowball. We saw that many years ago when Lakewood was built out in the middle of nowhere, and people laughed about why was that done? Obviously, that didn't benefit the city, but it certainly benefited the school district in the long term. And I think obviously this is going to drive future development in that quadrant. And we've talked for years and years, and how many years, about trying to get development in South Belton. We've invested a lot of time and money, and staff's worked really hard, and the Utley family. I think that everybody has given and compromise, and it looks like to me that we've come up with this, as you said, a winning situation for the taxpayers, but also for the future of everybody in this community. So any other comments or questions, Guy?
I did.
Well,
Oh.
since I had so many comments last time, I figure I probably ought to say something this time. I think it's a good development. I mean, just being brutally honest, I mean, I would have liked to have seen more on the lot size and the density issue. But I do feel like the applicant tried to give us more. And you can't just keep trying to squeeze blood out of a turnip, or eventually the deal is just not a good deal for them, and it won't get done. So I do appreciate them trying to do some more to kind of satisfy that request. So, I hope that it is the quality we expect that it's going to be. And I hope there's some bigger lots in there, and some of that gets resolved, and it's a little better than the minimum. But you can't put a hope in a legal document. And so all I can do is voice that hope. So, but with that, it's a good project, and it is going to benefit the city, to echo what John and David have said.
Thank you. Daniel, I think you had a comment.
I did. I have a couple comments and then a question for a line that was in the presentation. I mean, first of all, I think we're getting an excellent kickback, you'll call it, I guess you could say. That might be the wrong word to use in a governmental hearing, but
That's the wrong word.
Congratulations.
I think we're getting a great thing. And yeah, I'm the new guy. I don't have as much experience as these guys, but I did want to echo guys' concerns. Just, you know, when you look at the last agenda item prior to this one, you know, that lot size is 7,920 feet with a 1,300 square foot home. I really hope we don't get to the 11th, 12th, 13th phase of this and, you know, see all 5,000 square foot lots where we're all long and gone and somebody's sitting here saying, you know, well, Daniel and Guy in this meeting said, you know, now we told you so. And I hope that, like I said, like David and Guy said, you can't put a hope in this, but I don't want to get to that point. But I also had a question of, in there it said minor versus major variance. What is the definition of that? Who controls what's minor versus major?
It's certainly a judgment call. You know, with I think I've tried to itemize what some of those items might be. There's requirements for number of trees and setbacks are identified. We don't have zoning out there, so they establish setbacks, but you get into a corner lot or something and you can't quite meet the setback, that would be an item that would normally go to the zoning board of adjustment. So we're trying to find that balance, a little bit of flexibility, but the issues of density and masonry, you know, construction materials that were important points to the council, that would have to come back. You know, I'm not going to certainly the person in this chair would not be making those kinds of adjustments, but just what you might consider more minor type items.
So in theory, if it was something that would have went to ZBA, it'll just kind of be a staff issue. If it was something that
Correct.
wouldn't have been ZBA, it'll be council still. Right. Okay. And I just want to say thanks for all y'all's work and everything on this and everybody that's had time in it. I haven't had as much time as some other people, but I appreciate learning. So
I would say, Daniel, in answer to that question, the council has control of that. If your city manager, whether it's this one or the next one, is doing some things that y'all think you shouldn't be doing, you got it. You know, you're gonna know what's going on. And if you think he's got too much leeway, you certainly have the ability to handle that.
And we typically report to the council on changes that are occurring, you know, and you'll be getting permit reports about so many permits being issued in River Farm. And oh, by the way, we granted these 7 adjustments or variances, whatever, because they just seem to make sense. They were pretty minor. You know, are we on track, off base? You know, do you want to pull that in? As John says, you know, that'll be an ongoing issue that we'll explore as development occurs.
I did want to say one last thing. I did a little research on Three Creeks, and they have not only 50s, is what they were required to build, but they have 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I think a lot of that depends on the view, the scenery, the location, corner. So I think, you know, they've gone above and beyond what Three Creeks did. And I feel pretty comfortable that Creekside and View, trail,
you know, and market is certainly going to have a
all those
huge
amenities
impact on that.
that go with this property would possibly demand a little bigger lot size.
Sure.
And I feel pretty confident that would happen out there. But I know it's not a guarantee, but
It's a beautiful piece of property. It really is.
Just a couple of quick comments. I do need to put in the public record the fact that we have received petitions that have been properly executed to do 2 things. That's the city's consent to create the MUD and the city's consent to include the city tract into the MUD once it's the obligations for Toll Bridge Road are satisfied. So there's a important need to just have that in the record that we have those in hand received from the applicant today. And then the last thing I would just say is it's been a interesting process working through this with the applicant, their attorney, and the Utleys, and certainly Steve and Ann are here. If there's any opportunity for final comment or input from them, we certainly would like to hear that at this time.
Mr. Utley, if you have anything to say.
Steve Utley, 6101 Toll Bridge Road, 76513. Just
Just a few words. This has been a work in progress and will continue to be. I think as we move through the development of the property, the city will be involved and we will be making decisions, a lot of decisions together, because there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be done. And there's a lot of activity required on both. Hoping you feel like you're getting due compensation for that. It was important to us. The other thing was we hope that the council feels like after this process that we were listening. That's important to us. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the city manager, the city attorney, and the council for all your assistance in getting us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Utley. Appreciate it.
And if there's any questions, we have the team here to answer them. So.
We're good. We're glad to see a quality development that's going to impact our citizens. And I feel like for what you heard tonight, I think both sides feel good about the decisions that we've reached, and we appreciate your being willing to bend a little and us to bend a little. And as you said, Sam and John have both worked really hard on the project, and we certainly appreciate their time and effort too.
The entire staff team has done, a significant amount. Angela, Mike, everybody, Gene, all the staff members, and Trey Larry, all our team has really been excellent in bringing this together in a relatively short time frame for something this complex and significant for the long-term future of the community.
I agree. And just thinking back, and John mentioned Three Creeks, and several people have mentioned Three Creeks. This was a lot. This didn't take nearly as long as the Three Creeks agreement. So, that's a positive from y'all's part as well as I think the city's part. If there are no further comments, I would like to suggest that we consider adopting items A, B, and C all at the same time, unless I hear an objection to that.
Believing that we have achieved a win-win, win for the city and a win for River Farms Limited, I make that motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the measure passes. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing how that development goes. Yes, ma'am.
May I just say one word?
Certainly. Yeah.
I've been there before, so I ought to remember.
Amy's going to make you legal.
Yes. Ann Utley, 6101 Toll Bridge Road, Belton, Texas, 76513. And I'm home, which has been nice after being gone 30-something years. This is an incredible bunch, and I appreciate all of you, and thank you for all your efforts on this. It's been a pleasure working with your staff and with your board. And so I want to say thank you. Bobby and I are home now, and we're thankful to be here with wonderful folks. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're glad you're home. All right. That item passes. The last is the work session to receive a staff presentation and discuss possible amendments to the sidewalk policy. Bob, Dan Till's going to present that.
Dan Kirkley.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Mayor, it's not the first time people leave the room when I get up to talk, so it's okay.
Yeah. We've lost Dan.
He's looking for his marbles. Sorry.
You gotta make a presentation where we don't ever want to think about it.
That's a pretty high bar, let me tell you. Good luck. Yeah.
Back.
Welcome
Nobody
back.
said anything bad about you while you were gone.
That's not true.
Mayor, Council, thank you. I want to, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to bring this to you. We've spent some time thinking about this and reviewing the history behind what has happened so far. And so after discussions internally and the work that that our staff has done, I want to present to you what we find is a good beginning point to developing some sidewalk policies or trail policies, shared use path policies and things like that. So I just want to kind of outline a planning process that we went through, and then at the end of this, or even during this, if you have any questions or comments, let's begin the conversation so that we can, begin the process of developing these important policies. So I want to talk to you about these policies and receive your input and guidance. It's important to get your opinions and your feedback, and so that we can stay on track and continue on the good work that we've started. And as we mentioned earlier, we're not asking any kind of action. We just want guidance on this particular process. As you know, the ordinance was approved back in 2015, and it's contained in the subdivision ordinance, and it included a sunset provision after 3 years of the ordinance being adopted. So we're beyond that, but we wanted to discuss continuing that process. And the reason for that sunset provision was to monitor the effectiveness of the ordinance and to review if it's doing what we want it to do, that kind of thing. And just to outline the existing criteria, it requires sidewalks on both sides of collectors at arterials. And they're constructed when infrastructure is installed. And the ordinance also provides variances and waivers, and one is granted by the city council for certain aspects, and waivers are provided by the city staff for provisions that you see here, where there's in the ETJ, there's no maintenance, the ability to maintain the sidewalk and so on and so forth. And then beginning in the fall of 2018, we began to review the sidewalk policies. Staff began that. And so we began the stakeholder discussions and discussions with the city council and the planning commission. And since then, there were other items that needed to be addressed in the subdivision ordinance, those items were brought forward and those were adopted in the fall of 2020. And so, as you know, had some staff turnover, and so that was a little bit delayed. But during that time, we've done some thinking about the process, and we came up with this particular avenue in order to move forward. So in review of the information that we have in the minutes and so on and so forth, we learned that, there are a lot of questions and concerns about the cost of the sidewalks and the impact that it might have on development, particularly in the areas of affordable development or commercial, industrial, and institutional. There's really no consensus in that area. There was no real move forward point that the process was ended with. And, for us to just kind of pick up and run with it, and so we could finish the process. But there were some concepts that emerged, or that I saw that emerged in those conversations. And those concepts included, that we needed to look at the way we administered the sidewalk process. Is it too standard? Is it too rigorous? Maybe we look at developing a mobility plan, a sidewalk plan, or something like that. And then let's evaluate the exemptions and possibly think about affordable housing and industrial development. Those are themes that kept coming up and were very apparent. And so to address these concepts, we felt that a more comprehensive approach was maybe appropriate, as opposed to just beginning with a sheet of paper that had the red lines on there. It really didn't have a context of where we're trying to go with the sidewalk policy. And so this process kind of helps us put it into a context. And so it's more a comprehensive approach. And I think it will enable us to examine a more flexible way to administer sidewalks and trails and so on and so forth in our development process. So we developed the master plan, and along with that, we accompanied We also developed some planning guidance statements, which helped us put the lines on the map, so to speak. And so here is an example of the map. And it was developed now. It's a fairly comprehensive document, and we'll zoom in on some parts of it here in a second. But during the summer of 2020, Tina and our intern, they walked through the town and they identified all these facilities and put them on the map, combined with the work that Public Works is doing in terms of future facilities. You can see Loop 121 here. I think I'm drawing that on there. No, I'm not doing it. But anyway, you can see the yellow line going up and down there. And so, those are facilities that we know that are going to happen. So the colors on there are simply yellow is existing, green is existing, yellow is planned, and then red, yellow is planned. We know it's going to get built. Yeah. So there's construction plans for them. They're going to happen. And red is where we anticipate the facilities to go. And so it follows our thoroughfare plan very closely. So if we were to throw our current thoroughfare plan underneath it, then we would see all the red lines line up with a thoroughfare plan. Oh, and by the way, I decided not to do this at this presentation. We can do this later as well. But if you go to the city's website and you look under GIS, we have that document there. And you can zoom in and zoom out and go all around this thing and see all the details that are there. And if you want to see it later, we can show it to you. So I think this approach provides several good advantages, and it provides a long-range vision. It provides a plan of how these facilities will create an interconnected system. And it identifies where these facilities are expected to be built. And in combination with the planning guidance statements, the plan will guide the development of future facilities and paths. And it also identifies who might be paying for what. There may be some instances where we want to put a sidewalk in a neighborhood, but we know that there's no real development pressure to pick that up. And so we know that's going to show up on our CIP, and we can talk about eventually building that. But if it's an area where there's plenty of opportunity to discuss a sidewalk project, then maybe we need to put that on the private sector. And it may be a combination of both the public and the private sector. So those are great, great opportunities to do this. As we developed the plan, and we were talking about where to put the lines and why to put the lines, we came up with certain value statements, which I've begun to call planning guidance statements. And they have kind of evolved into four sections or four types. One is retrofitting residential areas. The other is retrofitting the commercial institutional areas, and then industrial. And then we have the areas that are open to new growth where there's little or no developments. So in the next few slides, I'll kind of hone in on a few things and show you what I'm talking about. So here's an example of retrofitting the residential areas. And immediately I'm wishing I had the web-based map and I could draw on this thing very well. Highlighter, there we go. And so I think I can, does that work? Okay. Well, then y'all don't, behind me, you don't see me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 24th and then Beale right here. And I'm going to put this thing down immediately before I put somebody's eye out. So the idea here is with the residential retrofit.
Oh, it's not clicking. All right, never mind.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So, so the thinking here, okay, we put it on one side of the road, 24th and Beale, we'll put it on the north side, east side. You can see the green connecting to the red. So we have a significant amount of interconnectedness there. That's one example of the residential retrofitting. We see some others in the staff report that we've highlighted. So we'll do that. So let's move on to, and I need your help there, Chris, because we're not moving forward at all now. And so the next one we'll talk about is Oh, beautiful. This is the commercial retrofit. So again, I apologize for this. So the one that I want to highlight is East 6th Avenue. And, you know, you've talked about that quite a bit. It's shown up in the comp plan as the goal is to be pedestrian friendly and so on and so forth. And so that's an example of a significant thoroughfare where, you know, we anticipate sidewalks to be on both sides. And where the opportunity arises for the private sector to build that sidewalk, we'll ask them to build it. And where it is, yeah, all right, thank you. And so, yeah, there's 6th Street right there. So you can see it on the other screen too, I believe. There we go. Sorry for making you guys crane your necks. But that, so that's an opportunity where we can, you know, where the plan would show, okay, what do we anticipate? So here the green is existing, red is proposed. And so we have some idea of where it all goes. And so you can see the green tying in beautifully into the red. And then you might even see, well, you don't actually see the South Belton shared use path, but it's anticipated, you know, as you know, in that area. So it all ties together. We have this large comprehensive plan. And then we're looking at the industrial area, and we see here, that area right there, mostly on the north side. And so we see very few red lines. And we anticipate that, you know, that may be a policy statement that you explore in terms of, you know, what do we want to see in our industrial areas or areas that develop with an industrial character, that type of thing. And so there's an example in the plan where we've basically not addressed too much of that at all. And so we've kind of informally taken the position that, okay, in the conversations in the past, we've heard, you know, conversations, although it's not a consensus, that maybe we shouldn't be requiring sidewalks in these particular areas. So we begin with that position, and we'll see where we go from there. And here we have an area that is, you know, largely in the ETJ, you know, some in the city, and these all follow, you know, the thoroughfare plan. And so we can see that there's a significant opportunity to see new development in that area. And so as we go through the development process, you know, we can evaluate future needs in terms of pedestrian access or non-motorized or however you want to view it with the area. And so we have those opportunities to evaluate that as we go along. All right. Well, believe it or not, we're getting close. So here is where the planning process kind of leaps off into the current planning process, into the platting and building, that kind of thing. And so when we talk about it in terms of development process, you know, the plan that is being developed, you know, has to be consulted in terms of deciding where sidewalks will happen. And I'm suggesting that when we decide this, unless it's specifically exempted, you know, new development has to include the sidewalk. But, you know, we have to be guided by the master plan and the planning guidance statements. And, you know, we have to have that conversation with the developer or the property owner to see if it makes sense in that context. You know, we believe that this approach, you know, gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of where things go, why they go there, that kind of thing. And it also opens up that conversation between the city and the property owner or the developer in terms of that discussion as to why we might want that or why we might not want that. And so we anticipate that there'll be some very familiar procedures, you know, in the new ordinance, although that hasn't been written. Like I said, we want to have that conversation first. But we anticipate that if a plat's approved and there are some discussions about sidewalks, then the outcome is decided by the approval of that plat. Very simply. And if there's no plat, then maybe that decision occurs with the site plan or something like that. And if there's any kind of issue where we just can't come to an agreement, then that issue is largely resolved by the city council. What are the value statements here? And that, you know, it it helps us to use our judgment and our common sense in terms of the context of the plan. And it helps us to, more or less find that sweet spot in the development process by avoiding, some of the things that we heard about or read about, or that I read about in the minutes, that a process is often autocratic and inflexible. And it also, kind of helps us to work together in order to come to a consensus and provide a product that we want, that we both feel, good about. But it also will avoid us, from throwing the baby out with the bathwater. In other words, we're trying to get a good balance between being too prescriptive and then also being too permissive. We have to have that side. We have to have a public interest in mind. We also have to have the private interest in mind. We don't want to get stuck at an impasse. We want to be able to discuss what we need and how we need it, and come to an agreement. Now, I'm not that naive to know that we might not have some impasses, but there's a process by which we can talk it out, and then we have a way of bringing some conversations to the city council for resolution. I think that's very valuable. So our thinking is that, we begin the discussion today. We continue the discussion with the Planning Commission, and then we take it, out into the public with the EDC and a stakeholder input. And then maybe in March or so, we begin the adoption process with hopefully at that point, we have some words assembled in the ordinance that everybody feels very comfortable with and can be happy with. And so we hope that maybe in early spring, we would have a discussion with the city council after a public hearing that we can, adopt an ordinance. So that is it. And, thank you for being so kind and patient with me to hear all those words. And as the plan is, we'd like to get your feedback and discussion. Are we on the right path? Are we off too far in left field, or do you need some adjustment from us?
I appreciate the effort and the map and identification. I'd also hope we could identify areas that are developed, that it is now up to the city and our responsibility to go back and put in sidewalks. And if we continue to force the developer to do that, but don't take our own initiative to go back and put in those sidewalks, like Main Street. So glad 13th is being done or discussed. South Main, Holland Road.
Yeah.
Some areas are fully developed and there's a muddy beaten path on one side of the road that the city should really commit to going in and putting in that sidewalk.
Yes, sir.
And if there's any way to identify those, I think it would sure be beneficial to our taxpayers and folks that use that beaten path.
Absolutely. That's kind of the flip side of the process, is to identify all that. And if you have a moment later on, go to our city website and look up that map. It's the last one on the list, and you see those things, because we anticipate that exactly what you said. We have a public obligation to do that as well. Everybody needs to have a safe place to walk. It's kind of like their right. But we understand there has to be a give and take in terms of getting it done all over town. Thank you for that observation.
I like the map, and to his point that, on that map, it's a lot of that red is going to be city responsibility that's in town and already developed. I don't know how much, and we haven't, you haven't gotten into the weeds of this, and I'm sure that's to come, but, I don't know how, I don't know that we've answered a whole lot of questions, but I think you've set something in place to get where we need to go. So the map is a good thing. The comprehensive plan for sidewalks and trails is beneficial, and it helps with the discussion with developers and everybody else. It's really just a matter of how rigid we're going to be to that, and how flexible we're going to be. Because there's some areas that still just don't really make sense to have sidewalks, and some of the red was way out in the future. So you got to be able to accommodate for that. You know, I think we had something, and maybe this comes up every time we have this discussion, but I'm getting old and I forget what I said yesterday. So like on 1670 or somewhere where there was going to be a requirement for a sidewalk. Well, you know, maybe on the map, there might be a red sidewalk there, but we're talking to one developer on one little piece, and we're going to make them put in a little section of sidewalk. Well, you know, that doesn't necessarily make sense. And so I think whatever we do, we've still got to have the flexibility to look at those kind of things and say, well, you know, we're going to have 30 feet of sidewalk here, and there's no sidewalk anywhere in the vicinity of this, and there might not be for 30 years.
Right.
So, you know, and that sidewalk will be deteriorated by then. So I think we just need to have some common sense items built into that. And then what I think I said before when we had this discussion, we may need to look at how we're classifying some of these streets too. So, I mean, maybe there's a black and white, very specific way you classify these streets, but sometimes I think we may have had some discussions on both sides versus one side in this particular area because this is classified a certain way. So, you know, that's another approach too. But, you know, I want the flexibility, but that's a two-edged sword, because if you have too much flexibility, then we're having these discussions over and over and over. And that's frustrating for P&Z and us. And so that's what spurred some of this conversation about looking at this. So
Yeah, our hope is that we would develop a system of sidewalks that would be appropriate. And that's why the map is important as a guide to kind of get there. And the plan helps, the guidance statements, what is the policy statement the council is making, basically. That'll help drive the situation. We want the flexibility, but, you know, it's not our sidewalks required anywhere. The current requirement for sidewalks on both sides of collectors, both sides of arterials is what gets that before y'all. It's driven more by the thoroughfare plan than by the land use. And this concept is more driven by what the uses are. We show the lines on the map in the growth areas, but it's really going to be more driven by the land use. If that stays all, you know, rural, residential, it might not need to be the same level of walk. And so more land use driven rather than street driven. And again, common sense, having some flexibility, but still with the idea of trying to end up with a system that builds on the substantial sidewalk network that we have already, which is amazing when you really see it, what the work that Bob and Tina have done to try to map this all out. So I think the sidewalk plan map is important. We've also discussed internally the importance of a thoroughfare plan update as well, to look at some of these things that you're talking about, the systematic classification of the roads that we have right now, and adjustments to that to make sure it's true and current and reflective of what the needs of the community are for the future. So I think some really important planning processes to build on. And again, it's certainly not done. It's not cooked just yet. But again, we wanted to try to start here with the plan concept and some objectives, basically, to try to put a framework on what we come back with in a relatively short time.
real short, all that rambling I did, the big point is this is a good start. It's a good foundation.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Because it seems like none of us are really ever going to completely agree on where a sidewalk should go and where it shouldn't. So, I mean,
Okay.
people that agree normally on some things don't seem to agree on that. So it's a very interesting issue.
Yeah, it is.
I agree that we're probably not always going to agree on that position, but I appreciate that map. That gives us a chance in our free time to drive around and look at some of those areas that we need to look at. And certainly there's some areas that we need to step up as the city and put some sidewalks in, and that's always a budgetary matter. But I like the idea of the flexibility. I like the timeline that you've laid out. I think it's reasonable. That gives them multiple opportunities for public input as well as for us to to hear that public input. So I think that's a great start, as the guy said. Any other comments about
Yeah,
this?
I made a list of items, but I'll probably just send them to Sam because they probably don't need to be on and on discussion. But you mentioned something about where you could possibly instill a fee for other uses that aren't subdivision, that kind of stuff. Is that something that could be looked at from a standpoint of a parkland dedication fee? I mean, if it's something that doesn't necessarily require a sidewalk right now, is it something that, you know, in lieu of building the sidewalk, you could charge a discounted fee that could be invested for, you know, we recognize that, hey, in 20 years, 15, 10 years, this might be needed. Is that something that could be moved towards, or am I way off topic here?
Well, we've
Right now,
done,
right now
the
we
option-
require them to
we've done that
dedicate
as an
parking.
option in the past, where in lieu of them building a sidewalk, they dedicated a fee in lieu of sidewalk that we could then use. Like what John was saying is we'll do the infrastructure internal, and then when it comes to you, we'll build the sidewalk, right? So it was kind of one of those things: pay now and then we pay later.
Put money in escrow, basically. That's a possibility.
That's something good for those questionable sidewalks, you know, but it would have to be attractive to that developer too. It'd have to be discounted to the point where, you know, if this is a 20 years down the road, you may want a sidewalk here. Well, you know, I'm not going to pay 3/4 of the cost, maybe not even half, but something is
The time value
is
of
a
money,
good
you know,
idea.
those equations.
Yeah, the fee in lieu is in there. It's just not at a discounted rate. So we just need to think about that and see where we can go with it. Good point.
Are you through with your list?
My list is gonna be mine's just gonna be, it's like literally like my personal feelings on sidewalks.
Okay. So
That's good.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that in lieu of fee is the escrow account, and it is reimbursable after 9 years, I believe, that the current language is. So if we don't, if constructing in 9 years, the applicant get that back. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
So we may need to change that if we go to a concept like what he's talking about. That may be something we look at. If it's a discounted amount, maybe there is no time limit on it. If it's significantly discounted.
So first, again, like everybody else, thank you for doing this. It allows us to look at it and look at policy and not the person, right? This person and make it kind of, you know, kind of a flip a coin what we're going to do. It lets the developers and the staff understand. So number one, thank you. It's great. I realize this isn't the first domino, but it's kind of a setting up a new set of dominoes, and you had those on there. So I just want to address those things that I think we need to consider as we develop that. So number one, we mentioned system, and I think that's good. But our system is not just Belton anymore, right? We're actually at some point going to extend to Salado. We're already starting to interconnect with Temple. So one of the things I'd like to see us do, we have a K-Tempo for roads. We might want to look at that with at least with Temple and Belton, because there are more interconnections between our two cities that may happen. So that way we don't have a sidewalk going to nowhere. So I think right now you can go, I think along 317 across the Leon River, underneath the bridge. So you can go from McLean's building all the way at some point to the Expo Center, all on sidewalk. So I think that's number one. Number two is we need to look, that's regional. Number two is historic district. I think we need to have some rules specifically in the historic district, because sidewalks are part of the historic district. And so if somebody comes in and replaces, and you've got a sidewalk infrastructure and they don't put a sidewalk back in, but it's residential, that could be under the historic group, right? That they've got a historic preservation board. So just roll something in. And so make sure that they're part of the stakeholders when we do this. A third one is triggers. You guys have already mentioned it. If you're 20 years out, or if you're 20 feet away, that should set a trigger on what we should do in the development, right? So if you're 20 feet away, we need to pay for the first 20 feet, and then they pay for the rest of it, right? It's kind of like water and sewer. So we should probably have some triggers, but if you're so far out, maybe anyway. So that's the third thing. And the last thing is when it comes to maintenance, it's great to have sidewalks, but if you have a ficus, well, I don't know, whatever kind of tree, one of these big trees, something, and it's right next to it, and then in 3 years, you can't get through the sidewalk. We maintain our roads. the sidewalks are in our right of way. We should probably, we mow in our right of way and all that stuff. We should probably, if the landowners aren't, and if we're suggesting that the landowner does do that and they don't, these are public, whatever, right of way. We need to maintain those. So we need to have some maintenance clause in there and review to make sure it's not onerous on the landowner or on us. So anyway, those are my comments for the next stages, and we can get in the weeds later.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Those trees are a real problem in some areas. And you're right, they're not being maintained. So any other questions?
One
or
more
comments?
question. We are technically under a policy ordinance for sidewalks. Would we be moving away from that to a, much like a parks master plan is, this is a sidewalk master plan? Would we lose any teeth in this?
No, I mean, my sense, and Bob answer too, it would still be a component of the subdivision ordinance is how we would administer it. It would come in with plat review or building permit review. So the mechanism for administration would still be the same. But the policy components would provide more flexibility in our mind. It wouldn't be as autocratic, wouldn't be as on every side of every street, you got to do a 4-foot sidewalk. But it would be, would build in some more flexibility than that. But the mechanism, you have to have some teeth in it in order to administer it.
Yeah, from my perspective, I backed off entirely of what I anticipated would say in the ordinance, because I wanted to have a process that's fluid and not, predetermined, in other words, like I know this is kind of what it might say at the end. Because I wanted to honor the conversations that have happened in the past couple of years. And I want to keep it open as we move forward, respecting the comments that we received from the council this evening, as well as from what we've received from the commission, as well as the public as we go forward. So this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Beautiful. Thank you, Bob. And
You're welcome.
before we adjourn, one last comment about school-city relationships. Up until 1926, the city council and the mayor were responsible for running the public schools. So let's be thankful that that responsibility is no longer ours. This meeting is adjourned.